broadcast started here shortly. Had a comment on one of our videos that was asking about which sensors to look out for soot buildup. So I want to discuss those sensors there, and also I want to discuss how soot builds up, how soot actually builds up, and how to avoid it. So we're going to discuss that. Let me know where you're watching from. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed to the channel. We're going to get this show started here shortly. There's a lot of things to discuss when it comes to these particular sensors and what kind of problems can come up. I'm going to show you some images and just give you some idea of what to look out for. We're going to get this show started. If you guys don't know who I am, I'm Adam with TAT Express. Let's go ahead and get the share screen. How you guys doing this evening? Hope everyone's doing well, staying warm out there. Turn this background music down a little bit. Yeah, I hope you guys are staying warm out there. I know we have a cold front coming in, so it's actually here already. So if we're here in Dallas, so temperature's pretty low down here. Temperature's pretty low. Hope you guys are staying safe. Be careful out there. A lot of accidents happen, especially with the ice that occurs in the mid east. So let's get this show started. As I mentioned, I'm Adam with TAT Express. If you guys are looking for service in the DFW area, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. We'll be more than happy to help you. We are experts in after treatment system troubleshooting processes, OEM repairs, maintenance, light duty, heavy duty. We got you handled. Let me get you a map up here real quick so you see where we're at. Appreciate the viewers that's come in and has visited us. Let me move this here. So here's the map here of us. Give us a shout, 972-225-3017. All right. So let's get this show started. I'm going to talk about how soot builds up, the effects that it has on sensors and the performance on your engine. I'm going to talk about steps to prevent or resolve issues. All these engines they all run with, of course, computers. So all these sensors are very important. You want to ensure that these sensors are not dirty, because what's going to happen is it's going to end up send some information, wrong information, whether it's more than likely it's going to be pressure. It's just going to send wrong pressure readings, temperature readings to the ECM and cause problems on the road. So once this starts to happen, the domino effect just continues to occur. So this is what I want to talk about. If you ignore these sensors and the soot builds up in these sensors, the ECM is going to be reading incorrect readings, and it's definitely going to have some problems where you're having temperature differences, pressure differential sensors that we're going to talk about. So it's very important. So guys, if you had any issues with low performance or issues with EGRs, anything like that, and you had it was actual sensor or even intake sensors, even with older engines, the Series 60s is real known for the boost pressure sensor to get clogged up. And when that gets clogged up, you're going to have all erratic driving. It's going to have erratic power. It's not going to be a consistent power. So these sensors, as I mentioned, if they're reading incorrectly, it's not going to send signals correctly to the injectors, and you're just going to end up having some problems. So what is soot? Well, how does soot build up? Now, soot in a diesel engine is produced it's a byproduct of an incomplete combustion. So, and when diesel engines operate, all they're doing is compressing air and injecting fuel in a high pressure environment where it just ignites spontaneously. It doesn't even use an igniter like a spark plug, not like a gasoline engines. So modern diesel engines are designed to maximize combustion and efficiency. Certain conditions can lead to incomplete combustion, resulting in soot formation. How soot is formed in diesel engines? Well, injectors Fuel injectors and ignition. Diesel fuel is sprayed into the combustion chamber in a fine mist. Okay, so ideally the fuel mixes evenly with air, ignites and burns completely. However, when the process is less than optimal, unburned or partially burned fuel particles turn into soot. So this is how soot is formed. And also there's different types of soot, okay, when it comes to how hard they are, and some of them are just light soot. So high temperature and pressure. Diesel combustion occurs at very high temperatures, and in the combustion chamber it's ideal to have the air fuel mix evenly inside the cylinder, but that doesn't happen. So when that happens, you'll have like rich fuel zones, and the incomplete combustion occurs, creating soot particles. Okay, so it's basically a chemical reaction. So when the combustion happens, hydrocarbons from the diesel fuel breaks down, and then when you have like a situation where oxygen is starved, then carbon atoms combine and form solid carbon particles, and this is how soot ends up forming. Okay, so factors that contribute to soot formation is air fuel ratio. So the image that I got in the background is of a piston, and this is just a generic photo here, but as you can see, the valves open and close. So the air fuel that happens in these combustion chambers, they have to be optimal. Okay, they have to be precise. So that means the right amount of air and the right amount of fuel. It has to be precise so that you can have less soot buildup. So if the air fuel mixture is too rich, excessive fuel compared to air, combustion is incomplete, leading to more soot. So when you see like these coal rollers out there, those guys are just running really rich, and what happens is they're dumping a lot of fuel to create power. So it's not really ideal. It's not really ideal to create that much excessive soot, and it happens when you look to try to produce more power. This is another reason why I'm against the deletions or any modifications to the after treatment systems or EGR valves or anything like that, because these modern engines are designed to run at a certain temperature. So when you start letting these engines breathe more by removing air restricted DPF filters and stuff like that, and adding more airflow and adding more fuel, what you're going to end up doing is increasing the temperature inside of these cylinders. So what's happening behind me here is a very, very high temperature process. It doesn't have an igniter, as I mentioned, so there's no spark. It's very high pressure. So when this happens, it's very hot already. So when we're introducing more air, more fuel, creating more power, this will lead to more soot, higher temperature in the cylinders. You will have some guys out there that, hey man, I've had mine eliminated for a long time and I haven't had any issues, and there are some out there that last a little bit longer than others, but in the long term, it really cuts down on the longevity of your engine. So other factors that create soot is injector spray patterns and timing. Late or uneven fuel injection causes poor atomization and mixing. So when atomization happens, it's happening behind me, when that's the process of the fuel and the air completely atomizing and creating that small explosion, that's that power stroke that happens in there. So if that mixture is not correct, if you have too much fuel or too much air, or a lot of less air or not enough fuel, you're gonna create soot. So this is another reason why I'm against the tunes, because a lot of times what these tunes would do, everyone's looking for more power, and they want to just pass everybody up on a highway as if they're in a passenger vehicle, which is definitely not safe. Guys, make sure to use that middle lane. Only pass the hammer lane when possible. A lot of these cars are not paying attention, so definitely be cautious. So if you're looking for more power and you decide to go for a tune that has somewhat of a credible background and everyone's saying that the tune is fine, you're still adding more power. And when that happens, you're either creating more fuel, injecting more fuel, or causing more boost. So any of this mixture that is off will cause excessive soot buildup. And I don't also recommend it for these higher mileage engines, because you're already looking at an engine, usually if you have after treatment problems due to sensors or excessive soot buildup, it's going to be halfway through the engine's life. So when that occurs, people like to, have it, do eliminations because they have a problem, whether it's a sensor or they're at a shop that doesn't know how to troubleshoot it, or the DPF system has been neglected for a really long time. When that happens, and it's not troubleshot correctly, a lot of people go to the eliminations and they'll go to a mod or a tune or whatnot on when the engine's already halfway through its life. So now you're increasing cylinder temperatures, creating more horsepower, pushing the truck past its design limits, pushing the engine past its design limits. Not only the engine, but the drivetrain as well. You're talking about transmissions, differentials. We talked about, I just released some information about differentials. So all this extra power is not something that is ideal for these engines. I would definitely just keep them stock. So poor combustion conditions also cause soot, cold starts, low engine load. So if you're lugging the engine, or improper engine tuning, as I mentioned, can result in incomplete combustion. So the way that you drive the truck can also cause excessive soot. So be sure to run the engine in its ideal RPM range. Don't lug it. Even if you're especially if you're running a manual system, be sure you're running the engine properly. So engine designs also could affect soot as well. So older diesel engines without advanced emissions controls like EGRs and DPFs produce more soot than modern engines. So a Series 60 will produce a Series 60 pre-emissions engine will produce more soot than a modern engine. Of course, that's what they were designed for. The modern engines are designed to be less contaminant. So this is very important. So after treatment system issues occur if these systems start getting built up. So if you have a intake sensor that's built up, or exhaust pressure sensor that's built up, or any of these sensors that are built up, DPF pressure sensor, EGR differential pressure sensors, we're going to cover those shortly. I just kind of wanted to discuss what soot is and the effects of all this. So if you have any of these sensors start to build up, it's going to create more soot, and it's going to end up causing more problems on the DPF. So fuel quality is also something you want to keep in mind. Low quality diesel has higher sulfur content and impurities, contributing to soot formation. So guys, make sure you're getting good quality fuel. If it's out of your control on where you get your fuel, then make sure you're replacing your fuel filters every 12,000, 15,000 miles max, especially on these high pressure fuel systems, because these fuel pumps are very delicate. They use fuel to lubricate the systems, and they're under very, very high load. So be sure to keep up with those fuel filter changes. So another thing that impacts soot is engine wear. So soot particles can mix with engine oil. It can also cause more engine wear when this happens, leading to wear in your main bearings. As I mentioned, some of the soot particles can be hard. A lot of it happens when it happens in the cylinder and it gets stuck in there. It can cause scuffing. Some of this soot will fall into the oil. A lot of times the soot falls into the oil and it mixes with it. This is why I recommend, when you guys run your extended oil changes, to be sure that you're running oil analysis at the end of your oil cycle to ensure you don't have excessive soot, because the soot particles inside the oil will be abrasive and will get into the fine places like the main bearings at the bottom of the crank and cause some problems. So emissions, soot contributes to particulate matter emissions, which are harmful to health and the environment. So this is another issue when you have too excessive soot and you're trying to roll out there. This is a concern as well. This is why the CARB and EPA have all these recommendations or requirements for the manufacturers to create these engines to produce less soot, because the particulate matter is considered contaminant, harmful. And guys, I'm not like all for how CARB and the EPA has approached this. I'm not all for it, but at the same time, these systems, I see that they're not really that complicated once you start understanding them and know how to operate them and know how to maintain them. But what I do see is when we have these eliminations happen or these deletions happen, and it increases the cylinder temperature, as I mentioned, because you're looking for more power. And when all this happens, then you definitely can cause some problems. So guys, this is just all insight that I'm sharing with you guys. So this all comes together. So be sure to make knowledgeable choices whenever you're trying to eliminate or if you're discussing that already. So clogged up components, soot can accumulate in the EGR system, the turbo, the DPF, leading to performance issues. This is why I always discuss miles per gallon, your MPGs, because your MPGs is what's going to be your health, your basic health line. So if you start losing MPGs from if you're going like at 7 or 7.5 and you notice you're starting to drop, then these are just some indicators that you could have some clogged sensors. Now, all this is considered maintenance. Now, I wouldn't say just replacing all the sensors. I'm just talking about checking them regularly, and we're going to start discussing which exact sensors to start checking for. I still wanted to discuss a little bit of solutions. So EGR gases recirculate a portion of the exhaust gases, as we all know, back into the intake to lower combustion temperatures and reduce soot formation. So this is what the EGR uses for. I know that in some cases, if it's not working correctly, it can build excessive soot, but this is what these modern engines are designed to. That's why I do not recommend eliminating the EGRs. The DPF, okay, so the DPF is supposed to trap the soot in the exhaust system and burns it off as in a regen. We all know this, but what we're talking about is excessive soot. If we have excessive soot, even if you have 500,000 miles and you don't have excessive soot, check these sensors that I'm going to mention here shortly so that you can ensure that your truck runs at its peak performance. So a lot of times these high pressure fuel systems are supposed to cut down on the soot formation. This is why a lot of them are going to high pressure, because they're able to control the combustion process a little bit more. But as I mentioned, if you go with modifications, tunes, those things can actually cause more fuel and cause more soot buildup. So these advanced turbos, they improve air fuel mixing, promoting complete combustion. So this is what's good about these modern engines. I know I spoke sometimes about the actuators. Now, some of these actuators, all these actuators that are built on these turbos run on sensors. So if these sensors are reading incorrectly, this actuator is going to be opening and closing, causing either too much boost or not enough boost and cause more soot formation. So this is another reason why it's important to check these sensors. So reducing the soot production is what our goal is. I talked about a couple of things that we can do. Now let's start talking about the sensors. What key sensors do we need to be looking for? What key sensors do we need to be looking for? Now, I want to talk about just a basic overview of what the sensors are. Now, these sensors can be located in different places now, but they're all going to be on all modern engines, whether it's a PACCAR, a DD15, a Cummins, or a Volvo. All these sensors are going to be on this truck. So let's talk first about delta pressure sensors. Okay, so you have two different delta P sensors, and there's different styles. Well, but they all do the same thing. Okay, they basically, you're gonna have one that's gonna be monitoring the DPF, and you're gonna have one that's monitoring the EGR valve. First, we're gonna talk about the DPF. So what the differential pressure sensor does is measure the pressure going into this DPF and measure the pressure going out of the DPF. Now, if there's a difference there, a high difference, if it comes without a tolerance, it's going to tell you, hey, I need to regen, or you need to do an active regen. Now, if those sensors become built up with soot, then you're going to have inaccurate readings. You can have frequent regens, issues like that, and people are going to be like, hey, you know what, just do a bunch of regens and clean it out. Now, if you have a clogged differential pressure sensor on your DPF and you're doing excessive regens, what you can do is increase the temperature on the DPF too much. You can overheat it, and these DPFs are made of ceramic, so it's ceramic material. So if you are doing excessive regens with a handheld, because the truck is keep telling you to regen, and you're not troubleshooting it correctly, then it's possible you can damage the DPF. So guys, keep all this in mind. Appreciate everyone that's joined us this evening. What's going on? State to state asks where I'm from Dallas, Texas, born and raised. Thank you for asking. I grew up in the city. As I got older, I moved out to the country, and now I'm in the suburbs. But yeah, born and raised in Dallas. Greetings from Greensboro, North Carolina. How's the weather over there? I know it's hitting us down here. It's not too bad. I'm supposed to get some rain, and right now we have the cold weather. It's down in the 20s. We're really not used to that. If you don't have the gear for it, if you're not used to it. But I mean, we get it probably once a year, maybe for a few weeks. We're thankful, but appreciate everyone that's joined us. I wanted to take a quick break. The next sensor we're going to be talking about is the exhaust gas pressure sensor. Now, the exhaust gas pressure sensor plays a big role. Let me go step back to the differential pressure sensors. These sensors can be clean, guys. Don't just hurry up and replace them, because let me give you some images here. I got some images of here. Get my images to here. They are. So here is a exhaust pressure. Now I got this in here, it's overlapping. I'm gonna have to move that one. Okay, so here's a exhaust pressure sensor here. Now this pressure sensor here it can be in different places, and the reason why I wanted to backtrack just a hair is because these sensors can be replaced. Cleaned. So here's a picture of a differential pressure sensor. Now, as I mentioned, there's different styles. This one here is for a Volvo, and it's gonna be monitoring this one actually monitors the EGR flow. Here's a kind of like a older model Volvo after treatment system here, and we're talking about DPF. So as you can see, you have a tube here and a tube at the bottom. You see them here. So that tube here is connected to this sensor, which is your differential pressure sensor, and the ports, one port is monitoring one side, one port is monitoring the other side. Now this is you'll see this very common use, but I've noticed like for Detroit, you guys know that I'm a big fan of Detroit. They kind of lead the way. I noticed that they separated this when they're measuring the pressure on the DPF. Now they have a single sensor measuring the pressure going in, and a single sensor measuring the pressure going out. So if you get a sensor like this, they can be cleaned. If you have issues with EGR codes, low fuel mileage, issues like that, you pull these sensors off and they'll have soot build up. So this type of soot buildup is what causes incorrect readings. In this particular, let me find this one here. If we can see the inside of this sensor, it's just a diaphragm. This is going to be a diaphragm here, and this is just an opening here. So if the opening gets clogged up and closed, then you're not getting real good pressure there, a real good accurate pressure reading. And that happens really often, especially the ones that are on the exhaust manifold, because they're just directly exposed to all the soot in the exhaust. So this also controls back pressure and turbo performance. So a lot of these sensors are all working together. So if you have a turbo actuator and you start having some issues, this will actually start causing you to have some problems too. So the next sensor I want to talk about is the EGR differential pressure sensor. Now this impacts on the EGR flow regulation, and in inspected and cleaned sensor ports and related components is what I recommend. Now, you probably usually not going to get into the after treatment system until after like 400,000 miles, but I would suggest checking these sensors probably once a year, getting them cleaned up so you don't have to replace them, because over time, if they still start running for a really long time and cause just more soot buildup, as I mentioned earlier, you're just going to have more and more problems later on down the road. So EGR differential pressure sensor is another one to look for. Make sure to inspect it, clean the sensor ports and related components, whether it's tubes or anything that links them. There's also a lot of temperature, EGR temperature sensors as well. They're important for accurate EGR operation. So you want to maintain these as well. I have images of that one as well. Temperature sensors are going to look a little bit different. Here's a good image here. Here's a good image of a dirty temperature sensor. So this temperature sensor is definitely not going to read correct. And with these ECMs taking all these signals in, this is what's going to tell, hey, turn the turbo on this, turn the EGR valve to this. So if these are off, then your air fuel mixture is going to be off in the cylinder, and that's when you're going to start creating even more soot. So EGR temperature sensors are very important as well. After treatment sensors, we haven't got it directly into after treatment sensors, but there's a bunch of them. I won't be able to cover every single one of them, but we're just going to give you a little bit of a roll, okay? So that we know what the emissions does. So control the sensors, make sure that you're diagnosing it correctly. If you have issues with temperature sensors not reading correctly, differential pressure sensors not reading correctly, be sure to troubleshoot it correctly. Identifying the problems, whether it's a soot-filed sensor or a bad wire, make sure that they're definitely getting checked correctly. The next sensor I want to discuss is the intake manifold pressure sensor. So guys, if you're listening and you have a pre-emissions truck, boost sensor is pretty much the only thing you need to look out for, but boost sensors are very important on all trucks. So even the modern trucks, they're most important. If you have, this is one off of a Volvo, if you have too much soot buildup, this sensor just pretty much monitors flow, and if the flow is not reading correctly, then of course the turbo is going to open up more, or it's not going to open up enough. Another item you want to look out for is your crank pressure sensor. Now, crankcase pressure sensor, this crankcase pressure sensor is not going to be on all trucks. Most of the Cummins are going to have them. It's a very handy sensor, but it does file out over time, so be sure to check that as well. Excessive, it basically just it detects excessive blow by, and it controls it doesn't really control much. It's just really excessive blow by detection is all it looks for. So make sure that that's working correctly as well. So the next item I want to talk about, the next section I want to discuss, and I'll get to some of you guys' questions and comments. I appreciate everyone that's joined us. We'll get to some of you guys' questions, take a little bit of a break. They canceled school already, huh? Yeah, some areas haven't started school yet. Some districts haven't started school yet, but yeah, they're already sending out emails about some schools getting canceled. What is the difference between the old diesel engines and the new diesel engines? They both burn soot off, correct? Well, a modern diesel engine is going to be designed to produce less soot because they're designed to be more efficient. Older diesel engines weren't designed to be too efficient. Fuel was a lot cheaper back then, so they were just built for power. But when you create too much power, you're going to create soot. So an older diesel engine will create more soot, as I mentioned, than a modern diesel engine. I'm just asking, what's the difference between the old and new engine if you're still burning the soot in the atmosphere? Well, you're on a modern diesel engine, you're capturing these particulate matter. On an older diesel engine, you're not. So yeah, there is a difference there, and it's capturing. The modern diesel engines are designed to capture the excessive particulate matter and cancel out the NOx. So that's the difference between a modern engine. You're not gonna have as much soot or particulate matter or contaminants being put into the atmosphere on the modern engines. As I mentioned, older engines didn't have that in mind. They didn't care that, the older engines would just blow as much smoke as possible. Can we use brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner to clean the sensors? Yes, you can. You can. Good question. Good question. Make sure not to damage them. This one here has a very small piece here, electrical piece here. Be sure not to damage it. Be sure not to, for this sensor here. And now if you have, make sure nothing goes inside the sensor. Okay, if you can't get it cleaned up enough, or if you swap out the sensor and it's still giving you issues, then it's possible you have to replace them. But yeah, you can definitely use brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner. Where are these parts located on the Cummins X15? I will probably have to do a video to give you an exact location of every sensor. I was wanting to just discuss all sensors, because since we have a wide variety of viewers that have different trucks, but these sensors are going to be located common areas. If it's an exhaust pressure sensor, it's going to be tubed into the exhaust. On an X15, it's going to be towards the front of the exhaust manifold. So their sensors are going to be located in different areas. What do you think of an engine with 600,000 miles with 12,000 hours? I appreciate that question. We had a discussion on our last broadcast about hours. And hours. Okay, so you're saying 12,000 hours, 600,000 miles. Now, that looks pretty good. That doesn't look like a lot of idling or a lot of total hours. Anything over 20 to 25,000 hours would be a lot. What I would suggest state to state is ensure that maintenance is in line at 600,000. You definitely have a lot of maintenance that should have been done. That's more than halfway through the engine's life. The X15 does have issues with cylinder heads and stuff, fuel pumps, anything like that. So be sure that if you're looking either to resell or buy, that maintenance records are in place, and some of these items, these main items, have been already repaired, especially if the after treatment system's showing any errors or anything like that. These after treatment systems, the DPF in particular, needs to be replaced at 400,000 miles. So if that hasn't been done, some of this maintenance is going to fall on whoever the buyer is going to be, whether that's you or if you're the seller looking to try to get this. And some of this stuff can be negotiable. I brought this up when you're buying a used truck. If you have you don't have consistent maintenance records, then that's something that you can probably negotiate when it comes to price. So appreciate that, State to State LLC. Thank you for joining us. We're going to keep on moving. We're going to talk the next section. Next is going to be, let me see here. We're going to talk about prevention next. What can we do to prevent it? That's the next subject we're going to talk about. Appreciate everyone that's joined us this evening. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe. If you're in the DFW area and you're looking for service, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. We're located off of 4140 Langdon Road, Dallas, Texas, 75241. We're just south of the city, so you don't have to go into the city and get into the traffic. We're very accessible. Give us a shout. Our information is in the description box. Make an appointment. We have some very fast service. We'll get you in and out very close to the parts houses. We'll be able to get you going very quickly. I was reading a comment at the same time. Aaron says he has an international diesel engine. Anytime I've ever had a mechanic pull the oil pan or anything, they often think the engine has been rebuilt. Why would be so clean internally at 700,000 miles? Well, International makes a pretty solid engine. Which are you talking about? The ones that are in the Fords? Or I'm sorry, that's not, wouldn't be a Ford at 700,000 miles. What engine is it? And how often do you change your oil? Changing your oil not very often, but in your maintenance cycles will prevent to you to have that dirty oil buildup on the inside, which will lead us into our next section of preventing soot buildup. So it's important to schedule sensor checks. As I mentioned, if you haven't checked them and it's already 500, 600,000 miles, get them checked out, get them cleaned up before you start having problems. Now, if you have already had them cleaned out, it's going to be best practice to kind of check that every year. Oil changes are very important. Oil changes are the lifeblood of your engine. Also, fuel filters and air filters. Now, we talked earlier in the broadcast, I talked about the importance of air fuel mixture. So if any of these are off by a restricted air filter or a dirty fuel filter, that will also cause soot buildup. So make sure you're keeping up with your maintenance. Make sure you're doing routine, regular regenerations when the truck calls for it. If you have onboard dash or if you have a handheld that can monitor these items, be sure that your pressures are reading correctly. If you see some irregulars and they're not dropping after regens, then that's could be some indicator of a clogged sensor. So be sure to keep up with regular regenerations. Don't skip them. They definitely will cause excessive soot buildup as well. So use high quality fuels and oil when you do refuel. Do your best to go to high quality fuel stations. Don't use anything that's gonna, that's suspect. You might think you have some low quality fuel there. Don't use that. If you don't have a choice, as I mentioned, make sure to change out that fuel filter often. And oil, when you do change out your oil, use the right oil. Make sure to, if it's CK4, APA CK4 certified, make sure to use good oil. Don't try to use older oils. If you have an older Series 60 and you used to use some kind of oil mystic and you're trying to still use that on a modern engines, make sure you do your research and the oil that you're using is the right oil, recommended oil for your engine, because not using the right oil can cause excessive soot buildup as well and internal engine wear. Now, you don't want to have any engine wear caused by oil, because that's your lifeblood. That's what's lubricating everything inside your engine. I saw somebody on TikTok the other day. I don't know what their name is, but he was doing a rebuild, really clean. Everything looked really clean, but he had like a top shot of the cam. It was a Caterpillar, and he had the top shot of the cam, and he was installing injectors. Everything looked really clean, but I saw how dry everything was, even the cam, and it kind of gave me anxiety to see that. If you guys are working on engines like this and you're, of course, putting on a head and you're leaving it overnight, make sure to leave some lubricant on that bare metal, because not all the times those heads come in with lubricant on there. So just to see that bare metal kind of gave me a little bit of anxiety. So avoid excessive idling. Ensure that you're using proper driving habits. Optimal duty cycles are very important for modern engines. That's why they have idle shutdown. You want to make sure that you're loading the truck, not super overweight, but that you are loading it at least 80% of the time. The truck needs to be loaded when it's running on the highway. This is going to create enough temperature in the cylinders to complete that combustion. So that's what's going to cut down on soot as well. So driving habits are very important. Keep that in mind. EGR and after treatment system care. Cleaning the EGR components, like I mention this all the time. I released some shorts about the EGR cooler. Inspect that EGR cooler. Pull that hot pipe off it if it has been over 400,000 miles, and ensure that your EGR cooler is not built up. So because that EGR cooler gets built up and the EGR valve opens up, and if that's clogged, then of course your air fuel mixture is going to be off, creating more soot and lower power, burning more fuel. Monitoring your DPF health, as I mentioned, performing your forced regens when needed. Don't do it excessively. Guys, if you got any questions or concerns, or if you had any issues about soot buildup, maintenance, and troubleshooting, make sure to hit me up in the chat. Guys, if you got any other questions about what we talked about today, make sure to bring it up in the chat. Appreciate everyone that's joined us this evening. Got a couple more questions here. Okay, let me go back. I'm gonna have to go to this page here because it looks like I'm. Okay, so it's an N30. Okay, Max Force. Okay, so you got a good brand. Well, I meant you got a good truck. Most of those Max Forces are not really that good of an engine, but if you have one at 700,000 miles and it's been kept up, most engines will last a long time. Max Force is International try to relaunch again. So how long have you owned that Max Force, Aaron? Let me know how that's been working out for you. When International first came out with their engine, they didn't really do too well. Some of them did do well, some of them aren't. Maybe you have one of the ones that are working well. It looks like that's what I mentioned. Long Haul's in the house. Thank you for joining us. Long Hauler 85, EGR tune up. Okay. IMAP sensor located on top of the intake manifold. Exhaust gas pressure sensor located right behind the thermostat housing, and EGR differential pressure sensor X15. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I was gonna pull up at each engine and give you a location of each sensor. So maybe we'll do that on our next broadcast. What I'll do is organize each platform, and then we'll go over sensor locations there. Today, I just wanted to talk about the soot buildup, what it does, the actual sensors that need to be checked out. So appreciate you sharing that, Long Hauler 85. All they need to be done is need to be cleaned, replaced with carb cleaner. So we had a question in the chat earlier that was asking them what type of cleaner. So yeah, carb cleaner, carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner. Just make sure don't damage it. If you're using any tools to kind of clean out if any of the soot gets inside there, make sure you're not damaging the sensor. Appreciate you sharing all that insight there, Long Hauler. State to State says, so with 600,000 miles, how many hours do you believe the engine should have? Just curious. Well, you mentioned it has 12,000 miles or 12,000 hours. That's decent. Now, if we want to get into hours, we look at hours. I saw some information. One engine hour of idling is roughly equivalent to driving 25 to 30 miles. I thought that was pretty interesting. One engine hour is equivalent to 25, 30 miles. So high hours would be over 20 to 25,000 engine hours is generally considered high, especially if the truck has not been well maintained. For comparison, a well-maintained engine may last 10,000 to 15,000 hours with consistent maintenance before needing major repairs or an overhaul. So at 10,000 to 15,000 miles with consistent maintenance before needing major repairs or overhauls. So 12,000 hours, you're close. At 600,000 miles, so has it had any extra, have you had any extra repairs done? When are you selling the truck? Are you buying the truck? Definitely look for maintenance records and ensure there's no gaps. As I mentioned, you have to do valve adjustments. That's very common at that mileage. Replacing the DPF filter, DEF filter as well. These sensors that I mentioned need to be cleaned. EGR coolers need to be cleaned. Turbos usually give you some problems. If hopefully the head has been replaced. I know that the X15 is a strong engine. It's rebuildable. There's a lot of parts available for it. It's a pretty solid engine, but in my opinion, I feel like it has too many major problems too early. To me, DD15 is superior when it comes to longevity. If you're looking for powerhouses, just understand powerhouses are going to cause more maintenance. So be sure to keep that in mind. creating more power is going to put more stress on everything, whether it's the engine, the drivetrain, the transmission, differentials. It's the whole system gets put at a higher strain. So keep all this in mind. Good question. 12,000 hours would be considered okay before a major maintenance, but that does mean that major maintenance is ahead if things have not been done yet. So appreciate that question. Long Hauler has some more information for us. He says the EGR differential pressure sensor is very powerful, very important. Yes, it is. The EGR differential pressure sensor is located in different areas. I have a video here of one on a Volvo. Let's go to that video real quick. So this is a tube or piping that's monitoring the EGR flow. So what he's doing here is manually injecting air into the system to ensure they're not clogged, because this piece here has piping, narrow piping on the inside, and then that's where your differential pressure sensor mounts, which is this sensor here, and it's reading the pressure difference in between the two. If you have issues with that sensor, then your EGR valve is not going to be opening and closing correctly. You'll have low power, issues with power, high fuel consumption. If you guys are experiencing any of these, be sure to get that checked out. Thank you for sharing that, Long Hauler. And the IMA map, or the IMAP sensor, calculates fuel air ratio. That will affect your MPGs. Yes, all these sensors that I mentioned will affect your MPGs. So Long Hauler 85 is mentioning the IMAP sensor, which is basically the boost pressure intake sensor. That's a very important sensor. All these sensors are very important. As I mentioned, they all work together. They're all working simultaneously at real time, very high speed. So these computers are expecting all these readings at a really rapid reading, a really rapid pace. So if they are clogged or incorrect or erratic, then you're definitely going to have some air fuel mixture issues and cause more soot, cause low power, issues like that. So yeah, all these sensors are very important. Thank you, Long Hauler, for highlighting that again. Appreciate you joining us this evening. If you got more stuff, let me know. Aaron says it is we're back to the Max Force that he shares with us with 700,000 miles. That's been doing great for him. Thank you for sharing that with us, Aaron. Aaron says that it is a 2017, last year of the engine, and it came off the mega carrier fleet. And you know how picky they are about their maintenance. Some fleets are picky about their maintenance, some aren't. So I noticed when that particular truck was being outsourced, a lot of those trucks were really good pricing on those. So I'm glad that truck's worked out for you, Aaron. Thank you for joining us. How often should you run overhead on the engine with 500,000 miles or so? Well, the initial valve adjustment is at 500,000 miles. On most literature, it's going to say this. And then I would recommend doing it at least once a year just to check it and make sure it's not out of adjustment, because once it starts getting out of adjustment, you start losing MPGs. So as I mentioned in my earlier in the broadcast, the MPGs is what's going to help you keep an eye on the lifeline of your engine or the condition of your engine. So if that starts to drop, that's when you need to kind of look into items that could give you some problems, whether built up sensors, clogged up filters, air filters, items like that. Overhead valve adjustment. Do the easy items first if you can't do everything all at once, but do not skip those overhead valve adjustments as well. And your maintenance, look up the engine's manual. You can look up a lot of these manufacturers are offering their preventive maintenance manuals or intervals online, so definitely check that out and follow that religiously. The only thing that I would recommend also and notate is about your extended oil changes. Some of this literature is going to have you doing oil changes at very long intervals, but be sure that you're doing oil analysis as well, just so that your oil is not just being completely worn down before you replace it. You don't want to do that to your engine. King J's in the house. King J says, hey bro, what is the white ash through the tailpipe? So white smoke compared to black smoke. Now that sounds like it could be, are you having any issues with power? Are you having any issues like that? Are you losing any coolant? Let me know if you're losing any coolant. If you still have good power, when does it happen? Does it happen during cold start, or does it happen while you're on the road when you're really trying to throttle it? What's going on? Because white smoke's coming from the tailpipe, and it signs of something. It's a process, something going on with the combustion process is not working. It's not working correctly. So the cause of white smoke depends on the condition, but typically indicates the presence of unburnt fuel, water vapor, or oil entering the exhaust system. Okay, so these are a couple things you need to look out for. Low power. Okay, so you have low power. It's possible you have some worn piston rings, cylinder walls, or valves can lead to insufficient compression, preventing fuel and igniting. So you could have some low compression there. I would do a compression test. What type of engine is it? You can do a compression test with the computer. Coolant is good. Low power, white smoke. It's possibly oil and unburned fuel. If you have, it could possibly be a fuel injector as well. So these are a few things that you want to check out for. So a compression test is going to ensure that it's nothing internal, like as I mentioned, worn piston rings, cylinder walls, valves, or anything like that. If your compression is good, then X15. Okay, so you can do a compression test. If the compression is good, then you would look into maybe some injectors, and make sure that your injectors are not worn. Injectors can cause this as well. Now, there's different things that can happen and can cause this, guys, King James. So it's going to be good to get it checked out. I wouldn't suspect a head gasket or a cracked head because you're not losing coolant. Do you have excessive crankcase pressure? If you don't have excessive crankcase pressure and you're not consuming oil, it's possibly an injector issue. Definitely get it checked out. Do you have any codes? That would be very helpful whenever you bring it in for troubleshooting. If you're in the DFW area, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. All our information is in the description. So if you are local, give us a shout. So there's a couple of things that it can be. Do you have any tune on there? Is the after treatment system kept up? Definitely, if you have any coolant loss, or you say you don't have any coolant loss and you're doing well, inspect the fuel system. As I mentioned, do a compression test, inspect the turbo. Also, if you can do a boost pressure test, make sure you don't have any boost leaks, because we happen. It's every now and then, huh? It's every now and then. It could be a boost pressure leak or a dirty sensor. Check out the sensors that I mentioned in this broadcast. That would happen as well. If you have a dirty sensor, EGR valve that's not opening correctly, a boost pressure sensor that's not reading correctly, then your air fuel mixture can be off as well. And since that's a good indicator that you're saying that it's happening every now and then, so that's a possibility that it could be a sensor or something like that, and nothing mechanical, because a mechanical issue would not come back and go away like that, be periodic like that. So I appreciate you sharing that, King James. That's really in line of what we've been discussing in today's broadcast. So be sure to look over those sensors first. How often should you run overhead? I can answer that question. Long Hauler says, be careful when cleaning these sensors that I mentioned, because you can damage them. Barry Davis is in the house. Did an overhaul at 1,072,365,000 miles. I was getting 6.2 after I filled it 169 gallons. I got 1,200 miles on a full gallon. Is that good or what? So what's your calculate the MPGs on that. That would be 1,200 miles. That sounds, let's see, 1,200 miles, 1,230 miles on 169 gallons. That's about 7 miles per gallon. So what you would do there, yeah, that went up. So you gained a 1 mile per gallon by doing your overhead. Good stuff, Barry. Yeah, that is good. So you got a full gallon. This is why I'm always sharing information about doing overhead valve adjustments and keeping up with maintenance, because once you start monitoring those MPGs, Barry's monitoring by calculating the amount of gallons he's putting, or dividing the amount of miles by the amount of gallons he's putting to get an exact reading. If you're questioning your digital form of tracking it. And he stated after doing overhead valve adjustment, he was only getting he was still getting good 6.2 miles per gallon. Now he's getting 7.2, so a whole mile per gallon. Great stuff. Appreciate you sharing that. Appreciate everyone that's joined us this evening. I'm going to wrap today's broadcast up. If you were able to get something out of this broadcast, that's hopefully you were able to learn something from today's broadcast. I feel like we did our job there. If you're in the DFW area and you're looking for service, be sure to give us a shout, 972-225-3017. All our information is in the description box. Give us a shout. Check us out. We'll be more than happy to help you. We do light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, everything that's needed on a diesel engine, light work, heavy work. We have expert mechanics in there, express service. We do our best to get you in and out as long as parts are available. Give us a shout. Guys, thanks for everyone that's joined us this evening. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe and share this video so we can share the knowledge in the trucking industry. Guys, be safe out there. Be warm. Make sure to check road conditions. Right now we're in January. It's very cold. We got a cold front end, so make sure you guys are checking weather and traffic, guys. Be safe out there. We'll see you guys next time. Good night.